Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. You're standing at the edge of a vast desert, or maybe high in mist-covered mountains, with no phone, no map, and no signposts to guide you. Yet thousands of years ago, people crossed these very landscapes, not by chance, but along purpose, built roads that connected continents, cultures, and civilizations. These were the sacred roads, the ancient networks that stitched the world together long before anyone dreamed of satellites or global positioning systems. Without modern tools, our ancestors engineered pathways of astonishing complexity, roads that carried not just goods and armies, but ideas, faith, and dreams across unimaginable distances. What's even more remarkable is how these roads were more than just stone and dirt. They were living, breathing channels of human experience. They witnessed the weary steps of Silk Road merchants carrying silks and spices, the hopeful journeys of pilgrims seeking enlightenment, and the determined marches of soldiers expanding empires. These routes became the veins through which history itself flowed, allowing knowledge to spread, religions to grow, and languages to mingle. They turned isolated kingdoms into interconnected worlds, fostering exchanges that would shape the course of human civilization in ways we're still discovering today. In this video, we're setting out on an epic adventure to trace these sacred roads from the legendary Silk Road that linked east and west to the breathtaking Inca trails that crossed mountain peaks and deep valleys. We'll uncover how these routes were built against all odds, how they nurtured both trade and spirituality, and why, centuries later, they continue to captivate historians, travelers, and dreamers alike. This is a journey into the heart of human ingenuity and resilience, and by the end, you'll see the world and our place in it in a whole new light. So come along, let's walk these ancient paths together and discover the stories they've been waiting to tell. Long before the first stone was laid for a permanent road, humanity was already weaving a web of pathways across the planet. These were not roads as we imagine them today, but simple trails worn into the earth by countless footsteps, the earliest footprints of migration, trade, and communication. Imagine a group of early humans following animal herds for sustenance, their repeated journeys creating faint tracks across the landscape. Or picture a lone trader carrying obsidian from one village to another, his solitary path eventually becoming a known route for others seeking to barter goods. These organic, informal trails were the absolute foundation upon which all future road networks would be built. They represent the most fundamental human desire to connect, to explore, and to exchange. As small villages grew into towns and towns blossomed into the world's first great civilizations, the need for these informal paths to evolve became undeniable. Simple trails were no longer sufficient for the movement of armies, the administration of vast territories, or the complex trade networks that began to fuel economies. This necessity sparked one of humanity's earliest and most impactful engineering revolutions. A powerful example of this evolution is the Persian Royal Road, constructed under the rule of the Achaemenid Empire around the 5th century BCE. This was not merely a path, it was a meticulously planned highway stretching an astonishing 2,500 kilometers from the city of Susa in Persia, all the way to Sardis near the Aegean Sea. Couriers riding horseback could traverse its entire length in just 9 days, a feat that previously would have taken months. This road was the vital nervous system of the empire, allowing for the rapid transmission of orders, the movement of troops, and the efficient collection of taxes, effectively holding a vast and diverse realm together through the power of connection. The driving forces behind the creation of these sophisticated networks were as practical as they were powerful. The immense economic value of goods like silk, spices, precious metals, and gemstones created an urgent demand for reliable and safe routes. Merchants needed to transport these valuable commodities across great distances without getting lost or falling prey to bandits. Simultaneously, military ambition was a colossal motivator. Expanding empires required efficient highways to deploy legions quickly to restless frontiers or to quell internal rebellions. Furthermore, administering a far-flung empire demanded a reliable means for officials to travel and for decrees to be disseminated, ensuring that the ruler's authority was felt in every corner of the domain. It was this powerful combination of wealth, warfare, and governance that provided the immense resources and will necessary to turn simple paths into monumental roadways. Yet, these ancient engineers did not simply impose their will upon the landscape. They engaged in a profound dialogue with it. The environment was a constant and formidable partner in the design process. Rugged mountain ranges, vast deserts, swamplands, and mighty rivers presented incredible challenges that demanded ingenious solutions. Builders had to carefully choose routes that navigated the easiest passes, found stable ground, and identified reliable sources of water for travelers. This often meant that roads followed the natural contours of the land, snaking through valleys and skirting around the most impassable obstacles. In many ways, the environment acted as the lead architect, guiding the placement and form of these early networks and forcing humans to adapt their brilliant minds to the immutable rules of the natural world. By understanding these humble yet profound origins, we can truly appreciate how these first roads laid the essential physical and conceptual groundwork for the global connections that would one day link entire continents. But these roads were far more than just channels for commerce and conquest. They held a deeper, more profound significance for the people who walked them. For many, these pathways were sacred, a physical journey that mirrored an inner spiritual quest. Think about the Camino de Santiago, a network of routes converging at the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela in Spain, said to hold the remains of the Apostle Saint James. For over 1,000 years, Christians from all across Europe have undertaken this demanding pilgrimage. Each step was an act of devotion, a form of penance, or a search for personal enlightenment, transforming a long and arduous walk into a powerful spiritual experience. Far across the ocean, in Mesoamerica, the great city of Teotihuacan was connected by wide ceremonial avenues like the Avenue of the Dead, which directed pilgrims toward the massive Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon. These roads were not merely for getting from one place to another. They were processional routes designed to build anticipation and reverence, guiding worshippers toward rituals that honored powerful deities and connected them to the cosmos. The very placement of these sacred paths was often believed to be divinely inspired. Ancient builders frequently aligned roads with celestial events or significant natural landmarks. A road might be oriented to point directly toward the rising sun on a solstice, or it might follow a river considered to be the dwelling place of a water spirit. These alignments were not accidental. They reflected a worldview where the divine was woven into the fabric of the natural world. Traveling such a road was therefore an act of moving in harmony with the universe, guided by forces greater than oneself. This spiritual dimension infused every aspect of the journey. Along the way, travelers would encounter small shrines, wayside temples, and sacred groves. These were not just rest stops, they were places for prayer, meditation, and offering thanks for a safe passage. They provided spiritual sustenance, reinforcing the purpose of the journey and creating a continuous tapestry of faith that stretched across entire landscapes. These roads also served as the stage for some of a community's most important collective rituals. Grand festivals, annual processions, and rites of passage like a young person's initiation into adulthood would all unfold along these established paths. Walking together in a ceremonial procession strengthened social bonds and reaffirmed a shared cultural identity. It was a way for a community to physically trace its history and beliefs onto the land itself, year after year, generation after generation. This powerful blending of the practical and the pious made these roads absolutely central to cultural cohesion. They were the threads that bound people not only to each other but to their gods, their history, and their understanding of their place in the world. The very act of travel became a transformative ritual where the destination was just as important as the profound change experienced along the way. Now, let's turn our attention to the incredible engineering that made these sacred paths so enduring. The true marvel of these ancient networks lies not just in their spiritual or economic purpose, but in their sheer physical longevity. With only basic tools and an intimate understanding of their environment, builders created highways that have, in many cases, outlasted the civilizations that constructed them. They faced a monumental challenge to create stable, all-weather routes across some of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth, from jagged mountain peaks to vast, waterlogged marshes. Their success is a stunning testament to a form of ingenuity that was both profoundly practical and brilliantly inventive. Consider the Roman approach, a masterclass in systematic, layered construction that has become the gold standard for durability. A Roman road, or via, was far more than a simple dirt path. It was a complex, multi-layered structure designed to last for centuries. The process began with the digging of a wide, shallow trench called a fossa. Into this trench, the builders would lay the stotumen, a foundation layer of large, flat stones that provided a solid base and facilitated drainage, preventing water from softening the ground beneath. On top of this, they added the rudus, a thick layer of rubble mixed with lime to bind it into a rough concrete. The next layer, the nucleus, was a finer mix of gravel and sand, packed hard to create a smooth, firm surface. Finally, the summum dorsum, the visible wearing surface, was paved with meticulously fitted polygonal blocks of hard basalt or limestone, creating that iconic, slightly cambered surface that efficiently shed rainwater into drainage ditches running alongside. This wasn't just building a road, it was creating an integrated water management system made of stone. On an entirely different continent, the Inca engineers of the Andes Mountains developed a contrasting but equally brilliant solution to the same problem. Their empire stretched across some of the most dramatic and earthquake-prone terrain in the world, demanded a flexible and resilient approach. Instead of deep, rigid foundations, the Inca built their roads with a keen eye for the natural landscape. For the famed Teotihuacan, or Royal Road, they would first prepare a leveled bed. Then, using nothing more than stone hammers and bronze chisels, they would quarry and shape granite and andesite blocks with astonishing precision. These stones were painstakingly cut to fit together like a giant, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, interlocking tightly without any mortar whatsoever. This dry stone technique, known as ashlar masonry, was their genius innovation. During the frequent earthquakes that shake the Andes, a mortared wall would crack and collapse, but an Inca road would simply shift and settle, the stones moving together before locking back into place once the tremors subsided. Their roads literally danced with the mountains, a perfect harmony of human design and natural force. The ambition of these projects is perhaps most vividly illustrated by the obstacles these builders willingly confronted and conquered. In mountainous regions, they didn't simply go around. They carved staircases directly into cliff faces and built retaining walls to create level terraces across steep slopes. To cross deep ravines and roaring rivers, they constructed suspension bridges made from woven grasses that were remarkably strong, capable of supporting columns of marching soldiers and laden llamas. In the coastal deserts, they built raised causeways to traverse shifting sand dunes, and in swampy lowlands, they constructed elaborate roadways supported by log foundations to prevent them from sinking into the mire. Every environment presented a unique puzzle, and in each case, ancient engineers observed, adapted, and innovated to find a solution that worked in harmony with rather than against the natural world. This astonishing precision was made possible by a suite of sophisticated tools that allowed them to plan with remarkable accuracy. Roman surveyors, known as agrimensors, used an instrument called a groma to sight straight lines across great distances. This simple cross-shaped device with weighted plumb lines allowed them to lay out the famously arrow-straight Roman roads that minimized travel time. For leveling, they employed the corebates, a long wooden bench with a water channel and supporting legs. If the water in the channel remained level from one end to the other, they knew the ground was perfectly flat. The Inca, too, were master surveyors, using an array of tools to achieve their precision. They are believed to have used simple but effective frames and water levels to trace consistent gradients along impossible mountain ridges. This meticulous planning ensured that these roads were not just durable, but also supremely efficient, enabling the rapid movement that was the lifeblood of their empires. The legacy of their work is a powerful reminder that true engineering genius lies not in the complexity of one's tools, but in the clarity of one's vision and the adaptability of one's methods. The sheer variety of materials used in these ancient projects is a testament to the incredible resourcefulness of builders who worked with what their local environment provided. In regions blessed with abundant volcanic activity, like much of the Roman Empire, a unique material became the secret to their engineering supremacy: volcanic ash. When mixed with lime and water, this ash created a remarkable substance known as pozzolana concrete. Unlike modern concrete that simply hardens, pozzolana undergoes a chemical reaction that allows it to cure even underwater, making it an absolute game changer. This innovation was the cornerstone of their most ambitious projects, enabling the construction of massive bridge piers that stood firm against rushing currents and expansive harbor breakwaters that created artificial ports, extending the reach of their road network across the Mediterranean Sea. They weren't just building roads, they were building an integrated transportation system where land and sea met seamlessly. Far from the volcanic landscapes of Italy, other civilizations developed equally ingenious solutions from their own natural resources. In the Indus Valley, one of the cradles of urban civilization, engineers faced the challenge of seasonal monsoon rains and flooding. Their answer was to manufacture strength. They perfected the large-scale production of uniformly sized, kiln-baked bricks. These bricks were then laid in intricate patterns and bound together with bitumen, a naturally occurring tar that was mined and heated to become a powerful waterproofing agent. This combination created roadways and drainage systems that could withstand intense wet seasons, preventing the streets of great cities like Mohenjo-Daro from turning into impassable quagmires. Their methods reveal a sophisticated understanding of materials science, using controlled fire and processed natural hydrocarbons to conquer environmental challenges. The process of getting these materials from the quarry to the construction site was a monumental logistical feat in itself, often more impressive than the building work. Imagine the scene at a limestone quarry. Workers would use nothing more than bronze or iron chisels and heavy stone hammers to painstakingly score deep grooves into the bedrock. Then they would drive wooden wedges into these grooves and pour water over them. As the wood swelled, it created immense pressure that finally cracked the stone along the desired line, freeing a massive block. Moving these multi-ton blocks required a clever understanding of physics. They were placed onto wooden sledges and pulled over a path of lubricated log rollers by teams of laborers or oxen. This method effectively turned sliding friction into the far easier rolling friction, allowing small armies of workers to transport astonishing weights across great distances. The organization behind this labor was itself a form of social engineering, often relying on a corvée system where citizens provided a set number of days of work per year as a form of tax, or on skilled guilds of stonemasons who passed their precise knowledge down through generations. What truly set these projects apart was their built-in capacity for future maintenance and expansion. The Romans, in their characteristic systematic way, designed their roads with clear ownership and responsibility. Major highways were the responsibility of the state, maintained by military engineers, while local roads fell to the municipalities. They even had a specific official, the curator viarum, whose sole job was to oversee the upkeep of the road system. This forward-thinking approach meant that repairs were not just reactive but part of a long-term strategy. The layered construction itself made maintenance efficient. If the top paving stones wore out or were damaged, they could be individually lifted and replaced without having to tear up the entire roadbed. This design philosophy, building not just for the present but for centuries of future use, is perhaps their most enduring legacy. It highlights a mindset that saw infrastructure as a permanent investment in civilization's future, a concept that allowed these networks to grow and adapt over generations, continually strengthening the connective tissue of the ancient world. These ancient highways served as the very economic lifelines of their time, the indispensable arteries through which the wealth of nations and the vitality of empires continuously flowed. Think of them not as simple paths, but as the original global supply chains, pulsing with the movement of incredibly valuable commodities that were desired thousands of miles from where they were produced. From the shimmering silks of China and the pungent spices of India and the Moluccas, to the heavy gold of West Africa and the vibrant textiles dyed with rare pigments from the Mediterranean, these goods were more than just merchandise. They were symbols of status, essentials for daily life, and catalysts for entire economies, their value increasing exponentially with every mile they traveled from their source. While the Silk Road stands as the most legendary of these networks, a sprawling web of land and sea routes connecting the Han Dynasty in the east to the Roman Empire in the west, it was far from alone in its global significance. Across the vast and unforgiving expanse of the Sahara Desert, a different kind of exchange was taking place. Along the trans-Saharan routes, colossal caravans of thousands of camels, known as the ships of the desert, undertook perilous journeys that could last for months. They carried life itself in their loads. Salt mined from the intense heat of desert pits was transported south to regions where this mineral was worth its weight in gold for preserving food and sustaining health. On the return journey north, they carried gold dust, ivory, and kola nuts, treasures that would fill the coffers of North African sultanates and eventually make their way into European markets. In the cooler climates of Northern Europe, another specialized network emerged known as the Amber Road. This route was dedicated to a single magical commodity, fossilized resin or amber, washed up on the shores of the Baltic Sea. This golden, sometimes insect-entombed stone was highly prized for jewelry and amulets across the continent and deep into the Mediterranean, creating a specialized trade corridor that linked the Baltic coast to the great civilizations of the south. The economic impact of these flowing rivers of trade was absolutely transformative. Where major routes intersected, or where reliable water sources could be found in a desert, small trading posts naturally blossomed into thriving cosmopolitan cities. Oasis towns like Palmyra in the Syrian desert or Timbuktu on the southern edge of the Sahara were not born from agriculture or conquest, but purely from commerce. They evolved into bustling international marketplaces where merchants speaking a dozen different languages would haggle over prices, negotiate deals using complex systems of credit and trust, and exchange not only goods but also news, currency, and commercial practices. These cities became melting pots of humanity and hubs of economic activity that supported countless other professions: innkeepers, guards, scribes, translators, and craftsmen, all there to service the endless flow of trade. For the empires that controlled these lucrative pathways, the roads were a direct source of immense wealth and a powerful tool of statecraft. Strategic control over a key mountain pass or a desert oasis allowed a ruling power to establish customs houses and toll stations. Here, officials would collect taxes on the value of goods being transported, filling the imperial treasury with a steady and reliable stream of revenue that could fund armies, build monuments, and sustain a vast bureaucracy. This control also became a cornerstone of diplomacy. Safe passage for a neighboring kingdom's merchants could be offered as a gesture of goodwill or revoked as a potent act of economic warfare. The promise of access to these wealthy trade networks was often enough to secure alliances, encourage cooperation, and bind peripheral regions more closely to the imperial center, creating a web of economic interdependence that fostered a fragile but crucial stability across vast and often fractious regions. Perhaps the most profound and lasting impact of this ceaseless movement of goods was the unintended but revolutionary exchange of technologies and ideas that traveled silently alongside the bales of silk and sacks of pepper. A new type of saddle design that made camels more efficient carriers could diffuse across continents. A revolutionary method for quenching steel, discovered in one region, might be observed by a traveling merchant and later replicated in a distant land, forever altering local warfare and craftsmanship. Luxuries introduced through these routes often created entirely new markets and desires. The taste for spices changed culinary traditions across Europe and Asia. The demand for silk spurred attempts at sericulture in places far from China. The introduction of exotic fruits, new musical instruments, or unfamiliar games enriched daily life in countless ways. This constant osmotic transfer of innovation and culture meant that these trade routes did far more than just make people wealthy. They continuously advanced technology, reshaped societies, and slowly but inexorably wove the disparate threads of humanity into a more interconnected world, setting the stage for an even richer exchange that was just beginning to unfold. While the flow of silk, gold, and spices along these ancient highways fueled empires and filled treasuries, the most transformative cargo traveling these routes was utterly intangible. These roads became the world's first information superhighways, carrying not just merchandise, but the very building blocks of culture, ideas, faith, art, and knowledge across vast distances, slowly and irrevocably weaving together the intellectual and spiritual fabric of humanity. This silent exchange of beliefs and philosophies fundamentally reshaped civilizations in ways that the merchants, their packs laden with material goods, could scarcely have imagined. Consider the profound journey of Buddhism from its origins in northern India to its profound adoption across East Asia. This was not a conquest by force, but a migration of ideas, patiently carried by monks and pilgrims who walked the same treacherous mountain passes and desert trails as the merchants. These dedicated travelers moved along branches of the Silk Road, stopping at cave complexes like those at Dunhuang in China, which became a massive library and sanctuary. Here, they translated sacred Sanskrit texts into local languages like Chinese and Tibetan, adapting the Buddha's teachings to resonate with new cultural contexts. The road itself facilitated this gentle conquest of hearts and minds, allowing a religion born under the Bodhi tree to find new expression in the temples of China, Korea, and Japan, creating a shared spiritual landscape across thousands of miles. In a different direction, the intellectual legacy of ancient Greece embarked on its own remarkable overland journey. After the decline of Rome, a vast repository of Greek philosophy, science, and medical texts, the works of Aristotle, Plato, Galen, and Ptolemy found a new home and purpose in the expanding Islamic world. Through networks of trade and conquest that linked the Mediterranean with the Middle East, these classical works were sought out, translated into Arabic, and meticulously studied in great institutions like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Islamic scholars were not merely passive curators. They built upon this knowledge, making groundbreaking advances in algebra, optics, and astronomy. Centuries later, this enriched and preserved body of learning would travel back into Europe along these same interconnected routes, sparking the Renaissance and providing the very intellectual fuel for the scientific revolution. The road acted as a conduit for knowledge, ensuring the light of classical learning was never extinguished, but instead was passed like a torch between great civilizations. This cultural blending is vividly etched into the art and artifacts discovered along these routes. In the very heart of Central Asia, archaeologists have unearthed stunning sculptures from ancient cities like Ai Khanoum that display a breathtaking fusion of styles. Here, the idealized, muscular form of the Greek god Apollo might be depicted with the serene, meditative face of the Buddha, creating a unique Greco-Buddhist art form. A stone frieze might show a scene from a Greek myth, but the clothing and patterns are distinctly local. These artistic motifs were not simply copied. They were absorbed, reinterpreted, and synthesized into something entirely new, proving that the exchange was a dialogue, not a monologue. The roads provided the gallery where these aesthetic conversations could happen, allowing a local artisan to see a traveler's medallion or a fragment of tapestry and incorporate that foreign influence into their own work. Amidst this incredible diversity of tongues, certain languages rose to become the essential tools for cross-cultural communication, the ancient equivalent of a common digital protocol. Sanskrit transcended its role as a sacred Indian language to become the lingua franca of Buddhist scholarship across Asia, much as Latin would later serve the scholarly world of medieval Europe. A monk from Korea could debate doctrine with a scholar from Sri Lanka using the shared vocabulary of Sanskrit texts. Similarly, as the influence of the Islamic caliphates expanded, Arabic became the indispensable language of trade, science, and administration from Iberia to the borders of India. A merchant in Cairo, a mathematician in Baghdad, and a physician in Cordoba could all correspond and share discoveries in Arabic. This linguistic common ground was absolutely vital, breaking down barriers and allowing complex ideas to flow freely between cultures that otherwise had almost nothing in common. The true engines of this daily, person-to-person exchange were the bustling way stations that dotted the routes, the chaotic market towns, and the welcoming caravanserais. Imagine the scene as a trading caravan arrived at one of these desert oases after weeks of travel. In the shared space of the courtyard, a Persian physician might demonstrate a new surgical technique to a Chinese scribe, while nearby, an Indian astronomer could sketch a star chart for a curious Roman merchant, using numbers borrowed from the Arabs. Stories were currency here, traded as eagerly as spices. Travelers shared tales of distant lands, their strange customs, and bizarre inventions. A folk remedy for fever heard in one corner might later save lives a continent away. A snippet of a song or a new design for a water wheel exchanged over a shared meal could travel thousands of miles, adopted and adapted in new lands. It was in these vibrant, crowded hubs that the abstract concept of cultural exchange became a living, breathing reality, fostering a practical tolerance born of necessity and a diversity of thought that became the greatest wealth carried on the ancient roads. While the flow of goods and ideas along these ancient highways enriched cultures and economies, it was the relentless march of armies that often provided the initial impetus and the enduring strategic purpose for their construction. For the great empires of antiquity, a robust road network was not a luxury but a fundamental instrument of power, a tangible expression of control that enabled both conquest and the far more difficult task of holding onto vast, newly won territories. These were military highways in the truest sense, engineered not for leisurely travel but for the swift, decisive, and overwhelming application of force. The Roman military machine provides the quintessential example of this principle in action. The legendary straightness and durability of the Roman via were not aesthetic choices, they were calculated military decisions. A Roman legion burdened with heavy packs, weapons, and armor could achieve a forced march of up to 40 kilometers in a single day on a well-made road, a pace that would be unthinkable across rough, trackless countryside. This incredible strategic mobility meant that a rebellion brewing in a distant province could be met not with a delayed response that allowed it to fester, but with the sudden and terrifying appearance of several thousand highly disciplined professional soldiers at the city gates. The road effectively shrank the empire, allowing a central authority in Rome to project its power to the very edges of the known world with stunning speed and efficiency. It was the logistical backbone that transformed the Roman army from a collection of formidable fighters into an unprecedented force of rapid, strategic intervention. This same imperative drove the Inca to undertake one of the most audacious engineering projects in history, the construction of the Teotihuacan through the formidable Andes Mountains. Their empire, Tawantinsuyu, was a vertical realm of deep valleys and soaring peaks, a geography that would seem to naturally favor defense and isolation. Yet the Inca, through sheer determination and ingenuity, turned this challenging landscape into a connected domain. Their road system allowed runners and troops to move with agility across terrain that would stop a conventional army in its tracks. A message or a contingent of soldiers could be dispatched from the capital, Cusco, and reach the most distant parts of the empire in a matter of days. This ability to respond quickly to internal dissent or external threat from rival cultures was the absolute key to unifying and maintaining control over a vast and geographically fractured empire. The road was the cord that bound the four quarters of their world together under a single rule. To ensure these vital arteries remained secure, empires invested heavily in fortifying them. A road was only as good as its safety, and a vulnerable route could quickly become a liability. The landscape along these highways was therefore dotted with a sophisticated infrastructure of control. Watchtowers were positioned on high ground, providing sentries with sweeping views to spot potential raiding parties or approaching armies. Garrisons were stationed at strategic intervals, river crossings, mountain passes, and key intersections, their presence a constant reminder of imperial authority and a ready-made rapid reaction force. Fortified way stations offered not just rest but protection for military couriers and supply columns. In frontier regions, these roads often ran parallel to defensive walls or earthworks, like the famous limes of the Roman Empire or the long walls built by various Chinese dynasties, creating integrated defensive systems where the road served as the quick response route for reinforcements patrolling the border. The design of the roads themselves was dictated by the needs of the military, Roman military engineers, the architecti, prioritized direct straight-line routes between key points to minimize travel time. The standard width of a major Roman road was carefully calculated to allow columns of soldiers to march several abreast, while also permitting two wagons to pass each other with ease, ensuring smooth logistics for supply trains. When these straight lines encountered obstacles, the response was not to go around but to overcome. They built sturdy stone bridges across rivers that could support the weight of marching cohorts and their siege equipment. They cut through hillsides and tunneled through rock to maintain their relentless, efficient course. Every design feature, from the camber of the surface for drainage to the placement of milestones, served the ultimate goal of moving men and material with unmatched speed and reliability. This strategic infrastructure was the silent, stone and dirt partner in every military campaign, the unsung hero of imperial expansion, and the crucial shield that made long-term defense possible, setting the stage for the even faster movement of information that would flow along these very same channels. This relentless need for speed and control in governance and warfare gave birth to what we might call the ancient world's first information superhighways, not made of fiber optics, but of flesh, blood, and sheer human determination. Long before the instant ping of a digital message, empires devised astonishingly sophisticated relay systems that turned their vast road networks into the central nervous systems of their domains. These were not mere postal services. They were the lifeblood of administration, the swift couriers of command that could mean the difference between a quelled rebellion and a lost province, between a timely trade agreement and a missed opportunity. The ability to send a message faster than any army could march was a strategic advantage of incalculable worth. The Persian Empire under rulers like Darius I perfected one of the most legendary of these systems, known as the Angarium. Imagine a message needing to travel the 2,500 kilometers of the royal road from Susa to Sardis. A single rider on a single horse would be exhausted, and the journey would take months. The Persian solution was a masterpiece of logistical planning. They constructed a chain of over 100 way stations, known as stathmoi, spaced roughly a day's ride apart. At each station, a fresh, rested horse and a new rider were kept at the ready. A messenger would arrive, swiftly transfer his sealed dispatches or oral message to the fresh rider, who would then immediately gallop off to the next station. This continuous relay, described by the Greek historian Herodotus with the famous phrase, "Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds," could see a message cover that immense distance in just 9 days. It was an administrative and military tool of unparalleled power, allowing the great king to receive intelligence from and issue commands to his satraps with a speed that must have seemed almost supernatural to his contemporaries. On an entirely different continent and in a radically different landscape, the Inca engineered a messaging system that was equally impressive, yet uniquely adapted to their vertical empire. Where the Persians used horses, the Inca relied on the ultimate human athlete, the Chasqui runner. These were young, highly trained men selected for their speed, endurance, and knowledge of the road. They were stationed in pairs in small, stone huts called tambos, which were built every 6 to 9 kilometers along the Teotihuacan, a distance an elite runner could cover at a full sprint in the thin mountain air. The system operated like a well-oiled machine. Upon hearing the approaching runner blow on a conch shell trumpet, the waiting Chasqui would prepare to receive the message. The incoming runner would relay his information verbally or, for more complex communications, transfer a quipu, an intricate arrangement of knotted cords of various colors that served as a sophisticated mnemonic device for recording numerical data, historical records, and possibly even narratives. The fresh runner, now in possession of the message, would immediately sprint to the next tambo. Through this non-stop relay, a message could travel an astonishing 240 kilometers in a single 24-hour period, connecting the capital of Cusco to the farthest reaches of the empire with breathtaking efficiency. The information carried by these ancient data packets was absolutely vital to the survival and prosperity of the state. For military coordination, the speed of this network was a decisive factor. News of a border incursion or a local uprising could be rushed to the capital, and orders for troop deployments could be sent back long before the situation could spiral out of control. For administration, these systems allowed for the centralized control of resources. Officials could send census data, tax records, and inventory reports from warehouses stocked with food and textiles, enabling the state to manage famine relief or redistribute goods to areas in need. Perhaps most importantly, they were the primary tool for disseminating the will of the ruler. Royal decrees, new laws, and announcements of succession could be spread uniformly and quickly across the entire empire, ensuring that everyone, from the highest noble to the most remote farmer, heard the same official pronouncement at roughly the same time. This fostered a sense of unity and reinforced the authority of the central government in a way that was previously impossible. In many profound ways, these systems were the direct precursors to our modern communication infrastructures. The Persian Angarium and the Roman cursus publicus that followed it established the foundational principles of the postal service, a state-sponsored, reliable network for the guaranteed delivery of correspondence. The Inca Chasqui system, with its emphasis on breathtaking speed over impossible terrain, prefigured the urgency of the Pony Express or modern express courier services. The use of a standardized, non-verbal recording system like the quipu hints at the basic principles of encoding information, a precursor to the telegraph's Morse code or even the binary language of computers. The sheer organizational complexity of maintaining hundreds of way stations, thousands of animals, and a corps of dedicated messengers demonstrates a bureaucratic sophistication that rivals any modern logistics company. These networks were not just about moving people or goods, they were about moving ideas and commands at the speed their technology allowed, proving that the human desire for instant communication is a timeless driver of innovation. This incredible feat of moving information across continents raises a compelling question. How did the individual travelers and messengers, without a single map or GPS device, possibly find their way along these sprawling, often unmarked, ancient paths? Navigating the sprawling, often featureless expanses between ancient cities required a skill set far removed from simply following a line on a map. Without the aid of compasses, printed charts, or global positioning, travelers embarked on journeys that demanded a profound and continuous dialogue with the world around them. Their survival and success depended on an intimate literacy of the natural environment, a mastery of celestial mechanics, and the careful preservation of hard-won knowledge passed down through generations. This form of wayfinding was not a simple matter of guesswork. It was a sophisticated art, a blend of keen observation, inherited wisdom, and an almost instinctual connection to the landscape. The sky served as the most reliable and universal guidebook, its pages turning with the predictable rhythms of the sun, moon, and stars. By day, the sun was an unerring timepiece and compass. Travelers observed its arc across the heavens, noting how its rising and setting points shifted with the seasons, but always provided an unwavering east-west axis. More precise direction could be gleaned from shadows. By placing a simple stick upright in the ground and marking the tip of its shadow at different times, one could trace a clear east-west line, a technique used across continents from the deserts of Arabia to the plains of North America. At night, the celestial dome took over. In the northern hemisphere, the North Star, Polaris, held a fixed position almost directly above the North Pole, offering a constant, unwavering reference point around which all other stars appeared to rotate. For those journeying south of the equator, where Polaris dips below the horizon, navigators relied on other constellations like the brilliant Southern Cross, using its long axis to point the way toward the celestial South Pole. The moon, too, provided clues, its phases helping to mark the passage of time on long trips and its light illuminating otherwise treacherous paths. Yet the sky was only one part of the navigational equation. The Earth itself was inscribed with 1,000,000 subtle signs for those who knew how to read them. Rivers were more than just sources of water. They were liquid highways that often led to settlements or converged with other known routes. A distinctive, lone mountain peak on the horizon, an oddly shaped rock formation, or the specific way a grove of trees grew bent by the prevailing wind, all these served as critical waypoints, confirming a traveler was on the correct path or warning of a wrong turn. In more developed regions, human-made markers augmented these natural signs. The Romans were famous for their milestones, stone pillars placed along their roads at intervals of 1 Roman mile, often inscribed with the distance to the next major town, and sometimes the name of the emperor who commissioned the road, serving as both a practical guide and a reminder of imperial power. Similarly, in the Andes, the Inca built small stone cairns or used naturally occurring rock formations as apashatas, sacred piles of stones where travelers would add a rock as an offering for safe passage, which also functioned as highly visible trail markers. The most valuable resource on any journey, however, was not a tool or a star, but a person, the experienced guide or caravan leader. These individuals were living libraries of geographic knowledge, having committed vast stretches of terrain to memory through repeated travel. They knew the location of every reliable spring in a desert, every safe mountain pass that was clear of snow at a particular time of year, and every village that offered friendly shelter versus those that might be hostile. This knowledge was far too precious to be written down and was instead transmitted orally, often in forms designed to be easily memorized. Complex routes were encoded into epic poems, songs, or rhythmic stories. A line in a song might correspond to a specific turn at a particular rock, or a verse might describe the number of days travel between 2 oases. This oral mapping ensured that critical navigation information was preserved intact and passed down through generations of merchants, pilgrims, and explorers, creating a resilient and living database of the ancient world. This remarkable, intuitive form of navigation, which wove together the celestial, the terrestrial, and the cultural, stands as a powerful testament to human adaptability and our deep, enduring connection to the world we inhabit. The human drama that unfolded along these ancient highways was as rich and varied as the landscapes they crossed. These roads were not just channels for goods and ideas. They were stages for the entire spectrum of human experience, traveled by a breathtaking diversity of people, each with their own dreams, fears, and destinies. At the heart of this ceaseless flow were the merchants, the true lifeblood of the trade routes. Imagine a wealthy silk trader from Samarkand, his caravan consisting of hundreds of groaning Bactrian camels, each laden with bales of priceless Chinese silk, sacks of pungent pepper, and porcelain so fine it was said to ring like a bell. This merchant was a master of risk and logistics, coordinating armed guards to deter bandits, negotiating with caravan leaders who knew the secrets of the deserts, and carrying letters of credit from banking houses that stretched from Italy to India. His journey was a high-stakes gamble where a single sandstorm, a missed water hole, or a successful raid could mean utter ruin. But the potential rewards of delivering his luxuries to the eager markets of Antioch or Alexandria were enough to fuel a lifetime of such perilous journeys. In stark contrast to these commercially motivated travelers were the pilgrims, whose journeys were measured not in profit but in spiritual fulfillment. These were men and women from every walk of life, driven by a profound inner calling. A humble farmer from France might spend a year's savings to embark on the Camino de Santiago, walking for months in worn-out shoes, enduring blisters and hunger, all for the transformative moment of reaching the cathedral and receiving the Compostela, a certificate of completion that absolved his sins. Similarly, a Buddhist monk from Korea might dedicate a decade of his life to the long, dangerous walk to the great monastic universities of northern India, like Nalanda, surviving on alms and the kindness of strangers, his entire being focused on the goal of studying original sutras at their source. Their hardships were not obstacles to be avoided but essential trials to be embraced, purifying the soul and strengthening faith with every painful, deliberate step. Weaving through these crowds of devout pilgrims and pragmatic merchants were the agents of empire and intrigue, the diplomats and the spies. A diplomatic envoy, like those sent by the Roman or Han courts, traveled with great pomp and a retinue of translators, scribes, and gifts of state exotic animals, intricate clocks, fine weapons, all intended to impress a foreign ruler and secure a favorable treaty or a military alliance. His journey was one of careful protocol and delicate negotiation. Sharing the same road but operating in the shadows was the spy. He might pose as a simple merchant or a pilgrim, his humble pack containing coded messages etched on bamboo slips or hidden in the lining of a garment. His mission was to gather intelligence on troop movements, assess the stability of a rival king, or scout the defensibility of a mountain pass, his success depending entirely on his wits and his ability to remain unseen amidst the throng of travelers. Beyond these well-known figures, the roads were also alive with the movement of artisans, scholars, and countless common folk. A master glassblower from Syria, his skills a closely guarded secret, might be invited to the court of a Chinese emperor to demonstrate his craft, his journey sponsored by a ruler eager to possess this exotic technology. A scholar carrying precious scrolls containing the works of Aristotle translated into Arabic might travel from Baghdad to Cordoba, bringing the light of classical learning to the libraries of Al-Andalus. And then there were the anonymous masses, families displaced by war or famine seeking a new home, entertainers and healers moving from town to town to earn a meager living, and sadly, the countless slaves transported far from their homelands as commodities in a brutal trade. Their individual stories are mostly lost to history, but their collective movement was the undeniable pulse of the ancient world. This constant flow of humanity created a vividly stratified social world on the move. The experience of travel was utterly different depending on one's wealth and status. An elite diplomat or a rich merchant might stay in well-appointed caravanserais with private rooms, secure storage for their goods, and access to fresh food and clean water. They traveled with their own comforts and security. For the vast majority, however, the journey was defined by hardship and vulnerability. Common pilgrims and poor traders slept in the crowded, noisy common halls of way stations or simply under the stars exposed to the elements. They carried their own limited provisions and were far more susceptible to disease, robbery, and exploitation. The road, in its immense scale, was a great leveler of fortune, a place where destinies intertwined and the lines between different worlds blurred with every passing caravan. Yet it also starkly reinforced the vast inequalities that defined the ancient societies from which these travelers came. For all their promise of connection and reward, the ancient road was a place of profound vulnerability, a stark reminder that every journey was a gamble with fate. The moment a traveler stepped beyond the safety of their city walls, they entered a world where danger was a constant companion, lurking in the shadows of a mountain pass, the emptiness of a desert, or the political instability of a distant region. The most pervasive and feared threat was that of banditry. In the vast, unpatrolled stretches between Imperial guard posts, particularly in narrow gorges or dense forests, bands of robbers found their hunting ground. These were not romanticized outlaws but desperate and often ruthless men who saw the steady flow of commerce as their best opportunity for wealth. A merchant caravan, slowed by its heavily laden animals, was a prime target. An attack could be swift and brutal, leaving travelers stripped of their goods, their animals, and often their lives, their bodies left as a grim warning to those who followed. The loss was more than personal. It could disrupt entire trade networks, causing merchants to avoid a route altogether until order was restored, strangling the economic lifeblood of a region. The natural world itself presented a catalogue of mortal dangers that no amount of human cunning could always overcome. A journey that began under clear skies could quickly turn into a fight for survival against the elements. In the high mountain passes of the Himalayas or the Andes, a sudden blizzard could blind travelers and bury paths in deep snow, leading to disorientation and a frigid death. The deserts, which hosted vital trade routes like the Silk Road's Taklamakan or the Saharan Trails, were equally merciless. The Taklamakan's name, often translated as place of no return, was a chillingly accurate warning. Sandstorms known as haboobs could arise with terrifying speed, scouring the skin and swallowing entire caravans in a suffocating, dark orange haze, erasing all signs of the path and leaving survivors to die of thirst under a relentless sun. Elsewhere, seasonal rains could transform a gentle river into a raging torrent in minutes, sweeping away makeshift bridges and any travelers caught in its path. These were forces against which human plans were trivial, and the bones of countless unknown souls were slowly absorbed by the sands, mountains, and forests that had claimed them. Even without a catastrophic event, the sheer physical ordeal of the journey tested the limits of human endurance. The logistics of carrying enough food and clean water for a weeks-long expedition were a constant, gnawing anxiety. A planned stop at a well-known oasis might reveal a spring that had gone dry or been contaminated, forcing desperate choices. Waterborne illnesses like dysentery could rip through a caravan, weakening travelers and making them easy prey for other dangers. Malnutrition from limited rations sapped strength, while unfamiliar foods gathered along the way could cause sickness. Beyond illness, the risk of accidental injury was ever present. A fall from a mountain path, a kick from a pack animal, or an infected cut could quickly become a death sentence in a world without modern medicine, far from any help. The journey was a relentless assault on the body, where a simple toothache or a sprained ankle could escalate into a fatal crisis. Adding another complex layer of risk were the cultural and human tensions that arose when people from vastly different worlds were thrust together. A caravan was a miniature, mobile society, but it was not always a harmonious one. Disputes could erupt over bargaining prices, the allocation of scarce resources like water, or simple misunderstandings born from language barriers. In regions with a history of tribal or political conflict, a group of travelers might be mistaken for scouts for an enemy army, or blamed for the misdeeds of others who shared their ethnicity. A poorly chosen gesture or a failure to observe a local custom could inadvertently cause grave offense, turning potential hosts into hostile adversaries. This delicate dance of diplomacy and respect had to be performed constantly, with every new village and every new group encountered along the way. The price of a misstep could be exclusion from a vital market, the denial of shelter, or even violence. Recognizing that these dangers could strangle the commerce and communication their empires depended on, ruling powers invested in measures to mitigate the risks. The most visible symbol of this effort was the network of fortified guard posts or castra, established by the Romans along their frontiers and major highways. Stationed with auxiliary troops, these posts provided a visible deterrent to bandits and a rapid response force to trouble. Other empires employed a system of armed escorts for a fee or as a service to state-sponsored merchants. Soldiers would accompany a caravan through its most dangerous stretches, their presence a clear signal to would-be attackers that the cost of an assault would be high. The most comprehensive solution, however, was the Caravanserais. These were not mere inns but fortified complexes, often with high, windowless outer walls and a single, heavily guarded gate. Inside, a large courtyard provided space for animals to rest and be fed, while surrounding arcades offered basic rooms for merchants to sleep, secure in the knowledge that their goods and their lives were protected behind solid walls from the threats of the night. These havens were spaced a day's travel apart, creating a chain of safety that made the monumental undertaking of long-distance travel just barely possible, a testament to the enduring human spirit of perseverance in the face of overwhelming adversity. After days or even weeks of arduous travel through bandit-infested passes and sun-scorched deserts, the sight of a caravanserai on the horizon must have felt like a miracle. These way stations and inns were far more than simple rest stops. They were the vital, beating hearts of the ancient road networks, the essential infrastructure that made long-distance travel not just possible but sustainable. They provided the three things every weary soul on the road craved most: security for their person and their goods, shelter from the elements, and sustenance to fuel the next leg of their daunting journey. Without this chain of havens spaced a day's travel apart, the vast trade routes that linked continents would have quickly withered, strangled by the sheer, unbearable risk and exhaustion of the road. The Roman Empire, in its characteristically systematic way, developed a highly organized hierarchy of these facilities to service its officials, soldiers, and the cursus publicus, its imperial postal service. Along the famed Roman Via, travelers would encounter two main types of stops. The larger, more comfortable mansions were essentially state-run hotels, spaced roughly 25 to 30 miles apart, a full day's journey. Here, a government official could find a private room, a proper meal, and even bathing facilities. More frequently, at intervals of about 10 miles, were the mutations. These were smaller, functional relay stations focused on speed and efficiency, providing fresh horses, chariots, and basic repairs for the imperial couriers whose relentless pace was vital to the empire's administration. This network ensured that the machinery of state could function with reliable speed, whether moving a legion or a message. In the sprawling, diverse landscapes traversed by the Silk Road, the Caravanserai emerged as the quintessential sanctuary. These were often formidable structures, designed like fortresses to provide absolute security. Picture a massive, square building with high, windowless outer walls made of sun-baked brick or stone, with a single, heavy gate that could be barred shut from the inside. Upon entering, a traveler would find themselves in a vast central courtyard, buzzing with activity. This open space was for the animals, the camels, horses, and donkeys that were the engines of trade. They could be unloaded, watered, and fed from central troughs. Surrounding the courtyard were arcades of small, Spartan rooms where the merchants themselves could sleep, their goods often stored securely in a separate locked warehouse within the complex. The design was brilliantly pragmatic, creating a self-contained world where both beast and human could recover safely. Yet, the true magic of these places transcended their physical function. When the great gates swung shut at dusk, locking out the dangers of the night, the Caravanserais transformed from a fortress into one of history's most fascinating cultural melting pots. Within those walls, a Persian merchant might share a meal of dried dates and flatbread with a Chinese silk trader, using a mixture of hand gestures and broken phrases to negotiate the price of jade. A Byzantine scribe heading east to copy ancient texts might listen intently to the tales of a grizzled Indian sailor who had ventured across the Indian Ocean. In the flickering firelight of the common area, stories were a more valuable currency than gold tales of distant cities with impossible architecture, warnings of strange customs to avoid in the next kingdom, or the shared laughter over the universal challenge of bad weather and stubborn pack animals. It was in these spontaneous, nightly gatherings that the Silk Road truly lived up to its name, weaving together not just silk, but the very fabric of human experience, fostering a rough and ready sense of global community among people who would otherwise never have met. The quality and grandeur of these establishments varied dramatically, reflecting local resources, culture, and the importance of the route. Many were simple, utilitarian structures built and maintained by local villagers or merchant guilds, offering little more than a safe wall and a source of water. In stark contrast, some, particularly in Persia, were architectural marvels of stunning beauty and grandeur, funded by wealthy philanthropists or the state itself as a pious act and a display of power. These luxurious caravanserais might feature ornate tilework, beautifully carved archways, small mosques for prayer, libraries, and even medical facilities with resident physicians. Their lavishness sent a clear message about the value placed on hospitality and trade within that culture, turning a night's stay into an experience of awe and comfort. This spectrum, from the rudimentary to the magnificent, highlights how these rest stops were a universal solution adapted to local means, all sharing the same core purpose: to keep the world connected, one weary traveler at a time. Amidst the sprawling networks of trade routes and military highways, there existed another category of ancient pathway, one designed not for commerce or conquest, but for pure spectacle and spiritual significance: the ceremonial road. These were not avenues for the everyday traveler. They were sacred stages, meticulously engineered for rituals, royal processions, and public displays of power that were as much about politics as they were about piety. While other roads served the practical needs of the body and the state, these ceremonial routes catered to the soul of a civilization and the carefully crafted image of its ruler, transforming movement into a powerful performance. One of the most profound examples was the Sacred Way in ancient Greece, the 22-kilometer road that connected Athens to the major sanctuary of Demeter and Persephone at Eleusis. This was not merely a path for pilgrims, it was the central artery of the Eleusinian mysteries, one of the most important secret religious rites of the ancient world. Each year, a solemn procession of initiates, priests, and officials would walk this road, reenacting the myth of the goddess Demeter's search for her lost daughter. The journey itself was a vital part of the transformative ritual, a physical and spiritual progression from the profane world of the city to the sacred space of the Telesterian Hall in Eleusis, where the final, secret revelations would occur. Walking the Sacred Way was an act of devotion that bound the community together through a shared, awe-inspiring experience. In a similar vein, the ancient Egyptians mastered the art of the ceremonial procession along avenues that were nothing short of monumental. The most spectacular of these connected major temple complexes, like the 3-kilometer-long avenue of sphinxes that once joined the temples of Karnak and Luxor in Thebes. This was not a public thoroughfare, it was a divine corridor. Lining the route on both sides were hundreds of statues with the body of a lion and the head of a ram, a creature sacred to the god Ammon. During the annual Opet festival, The cult statues of the gods Amun, Mut, and Khonsu were placed atop ceremonial barks and carried by priests along this avenue from Karnak to Luxor. The journey symbolized the gods visiting each other, rejuvenating their divine power, and in doing so, reaffirming the pharaoh's own divine right to rule. The road itself, flanked by these imposing mythical guardians, was a physical manifestation of the connection between the earthly and the divine realms. The design and regulation of these ceremonial pathways were deliberately exclusive and awe-inspiring. They were often the most elaborately decorated of all ancient constructions. Imagine walking a road lined with towering statues of past pharaohs or Greek heroes, their stone eyes watching your every step. The surfaces might be paved with rare stones or inlaid with precious metals, and the route would be dotted with altars for offerings and inscribed stelae proclaiming the greatness of the king or the gods who sanctioned his rule. Access was strictly controlled. Common citizens were typically spectators, allowed to line the route and watch the processions but forbidden from stepping onto the sacred pavement itself. That privilege was reserved for the religious elite, the royal family, and their honored guests. This exclusivity heightened the mystery and grandeur of the events, reinforcing the social hierarchy and making the ceremony an undeniable display of who held power, both temporal and spiritual. Ultimately, the true purpose of these magnificent roads was to make abstract concepts of power and faith tangible and unforgettable. A royal progress where a king or emperor traveled a ceremonial route through his domains was a masterclass in political theater. It allowed distant subjects to see their ruler in all his magnificence, surrounded by soldiers, officials, and symbols of office. This visible display of wealth, military strength, and religious sanction was a potent tool for maintaining loyalty and discouraging rebellion. The ceremony, played out on its dedicated stage, told a story of order triumphing over chaos, of a ruler chosen by the gods, and of a cultural identity that was unique and worth preserving. These roads were therefore more than just stone and mortar. They were the physical scripts for the most important performances a civilization could stage, ensuring that with every procession, the foundational myths and power structures of the society were ritually renewed and etched into the collective memory of all who witnessed them. The very paths that carried traders, soldiers, and pilgrims did more than just connect existing cities. They actively gave birth to them, acting as the primordial seeds from which great urban centers sprouted and flourished. Ancient roads were not mere features on the landscape. They were powerful forces of urban planning, dictating where people would gather, how they would live, and ultimately, the very shape and soul of their settlements. The location of a new town was rarely an accident of geography alone. It was a calculated decision based on the logic of the road. A natural crossroads where two or more major routes intersected became a natural meeting point, a place where goods and people from different directions would inevitably converge. A reliable ford across a mighty river or a sturdy bridge built by Imperial engineers created a vital choke point that every north-south traveler had to pass through. And a strategically placed trading post, perhaps once just a simple cluster of tents offering respite to a caravan, could, over generations, evolve into a permanent market town, its economy forever tied to the constant flow of passers-by. The legendary city of Petra, carved into the rose-red cliffs of southern Jordan, stands as a breathtaking testament to this phenomenon. Petra was not situated for agriculture or easy defense. Its genius loci was its position as a caravan hub. It sat at the crucial convergence of several major trade routes, including those carrying frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia to the Mediterranean. The Nabateans, the ingenious people who built Petra, mastered the control of water in the desert, making their city an indispensable oasis. every caravan traveling north from Arabia or south from Gaza would have to stop here to water its animals, rest its drivers, and pay taxes to the Nabatean kingdom. This relentless flow of commerce funded the construction of its magnificent tombs, temples, and theaters, literally carving a city of immense wealth directly out of the rock, all thanks to its privileged position on the ancient highway. On an entirely different scale, the expansion of Rome itself was fundamentally engineered by its road network. While the famous saying, "All roads lead to Rome," was a poetic truth, the reverse was equally powerful. All roads radiated from Rome. The Forum Romanum was the symbolic heart of the empire, and the Great Via the Appian Way, the Via Flaminia, the Via Aurelia were like arteries pumping the lifeblood of military might, administrative control, and cultural influence out to the farthest provinces. This radial design meant that every new conquest, every new territory, was physically tied back to the capital. The roads ensured that Rome was not just a city, but the central node in a vast, interconnected web, with its influence and authority literally paved into the landscape of its empire. Once a settlement was established, the roads continued to dictate its internal logic and daily rhythm. The main thoroughfare into a town became its backbone, its primary street. This road would directly determine the street pattern, often creating a clear main axis from which smaller lanes and alleys would branch off. The most valuable real estate was always along this main road, fronting the route with the highest foot and cart traffic. This is where markets would naturally spring up, not in a secluded town square, but right along the roadside where merchants could hawk their wares directly to travelers and locals alike. Defensive structures were also planned around access. City gates were built where the roads entered the walls, and the walls themselves were often designed to incorporate and protect these vital entry points. The road was the lifeline, and the city's layout was a direct reflection of its need to both capitalize on and protect that connection. This symbiotic relationship between road and settlement created a self-reinforcing cycle of growth and specialization. As a town prospered from the trade on its main road, it would naturally expand. The areas just outside the city walls, once empty fields, would develop into bustling suburbs or faubourgs, offering services to travelers who arrived after the gates had closed for the night. Within the walls, distinct specialized districts would emerge. One neighborhood might become known for its potters, another for its metalworkers, all situated to have easy access to the road to receive raw materials and ship out finished goods. The road brought the prosperity that allowed the city to grow, and that growing city, in turn, generated even more traffic and trade, further cementing the road's importance. This cycle turned small way stations into thriving cities, and thriving cities into metropolises that dominated their regions for centuries. The most fascinating aspect of this ancient urban planning is how its ghost still walks among us today. The legacy of these patterns is etched into the modern maps of countless cities. In many European towns, you can still walk the original Roman road, now often called the High Street or the Main Street, which remains the commercial and social center of the community. The radial pattern of roads converging on a central point, so clearly demonstrated by Rome, is replicated in the design of capitals like Washington, D.C. or Paris, where grand avenues symbolically and physically connect the city to the nation. The very reason a modern city exists where it does can often be traced back to an ancient ford, a medieval trading post, or a Roman crossroads. We are still living in the urban footprints laid down by the builders of those sacred roads, our daily commutes retracing the paths of merchants, legionaries, and pilgrims from millennia past. Yet for all their engineering brilliance and enduring legacy, even the greatest of these ancient pathways could not withstand the relentless march of time and the shifting tides of history. The vibrant hum of commerce, the rhythmic tramp of soldiers, and the murmured prayers of pilgrims that once brought these roads to life gradually faded into an echoing silence. Their decline was rarely a single dramatic event, but rather a slow, complex unraveling caused by a confluence of political collapse, economic transformation, and environmental forces that ultimately rendered these magnificent networks obsolete. The very empires that had poured their wealth and ambition into building and maintaining these roads were often the first to see them fall into disrepair. The collapse of central authority, like the slow fragmentation of the Roman Empire in the west or the swift conquest of the Inca by Spanish forces, had an immediate and catastrophic effect. The sophisticated state machinery responsible for maintenance, the teams of engineers, the dedicated curators viarum, the corvée labor systems simply vanished. Without this organized upkeep, the ingenious drainage systems clogged, paving stones were pried loose by locals for building materials, and bridges weakened by annual floods eventually collapsed, cutting vital links in the chain. Furthermore, the breakdown of law and order meant that the once secure routes became dangerously infested with bandits and warlords, making travel a suicidal gamble rather than a calculated risk. The road that had been a symbol of imperial power and safety now became a testament to its absence, a dangerous and decaying relic. At the same time, the economic foundations that justified the immense cost of maintaining these land routes began to shift beneath them. The discovery and mastery of new maritime technologies offered a compelling alternative. Why undertake a grueling, months-long overland journey across mountains and deserts, paying tolls at every pass and constantly fearing bandits, when a ship could carry vastly more cargo for a fraction of the cost? The rise of reliable oceanic trade routes, especially following the European age of exploration, fundamentally redirected the flow of global commerce. The ancient Silk Road, for centuries the primary conduit between East and West, saw its importance steadily diminish as Portuguese caravels and later Dutch and English East Indiamen began to ferry silks, spices, and porcelain directly from Asian ports to European markets. Similarly, new land routes could also displace old ones based on political changes. The emergence of powerful caliphates in the Middle East sometimes created more favorable conditions for alternative paths, leaving once great roads like those of the Byzantine Empire to slowly fade into obscurity as trade chose a different, safer course. The environment itself, which ancient engineers had worked so skillfully to overcome, often had the final word in sealing a road's fate. Centuries of climate change could dramatically alter the landscapes these roads traversed. In some regions, prolonged droughts and advancing desertification buried entire sections under shifting sand dunes, completely erasing them from view and memory. In others, increased rainfall and flooding could accelerate erosion, washing away crucial causeways or carving deep gullies across the path. Earthquakes, a constant threat in regions like the Andes, could trigger massive landslides that blocked high mountain passes forever. Nature, in its patient, inexorable way, began the process of reclamation. Grasses and roots cracked apart stonework, forests encroached on cleared verges, and sediments slowly buried the raised beds, effectively camouflaging human achievement under a blanket of wilderness. Adding a final, devastating blow to this already precarious situation were catastrophic human events, most notably the spread of pandemic disease. The outbreak of the Black Death in the 14th century provides a stark example. As this terrible plague swept along trade routes from Asia into Europe, it did not just kill a huge portion of the population. It utterly shattered the economic and social structures that depended on mobility. Fear of contagion brought travel and trade to a near standstill. markets collapsed, long-distance commerce became almost non-existent, and the complex web of interdependence that required goods and people to be in constant motion simply unraveled. In the profound silence that followed the pandemic, there was no longer any need for the roads. They were not just damaged, they were forgotten, their purpose erased from living memory within a generation. Over the ensuing centuries, many were cannibalized for their valuable stone, repurposed as local footpaths, or simply abandoned to the elements. What remained were not grand highways but fragmented clues, a short stretch of paving stones in a farmer's field, the crumbling abutment of a bridge leading to nowhere, or a lonely milestone half sunk into the earth, waiting centuries for someone to rediscover its story. For centuries, the magnificent roads that once linked continents were little more than whispered legends and fragmented ruins, their full glory hidden by sand, soil, and the relentless advance of nature. The task of pulling these wonders back into the light has fallen to modern archaeology, a field that has been utterly transformed by a suite of powerful new technologies, allowing us to see the ancient world with a clarity our predecessors could never have imagined. The most revolutionary of these tools is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine a specially equipped aircraft flying over a dense, impenetrable jungle canopy in Central America or a rugged, overgrown hillside in the Andes. It sends down millions of laser pulses every second, and these pulses penetrate the smallest gaps in the leaves and vegetation, bouncing off the solid ground below. By meticulously measuring the time it takes for each pulse to return, a computer can then strip away every single tree, bush, and vine, revealing a perfectly detailed three-dimensional map of the ground surface beneath. This is how archaeologists have recently discovered vast, unsuspected stretches of Maya causeways deep in the Guatemalan rainforest and identified previously unknown branches of the Inca Teotihuacan snaking across remote mountain peaks, proving these networks were even more extensive than the historical records indicated. From the incredible vantage point of space, satellite imagery provides another powerful set of eyes. Modern satellites don't just take pictures, they use multispectral and hyperspectral sensors to see far beyond the narrow range of visible light. They can detect subtle differences in soil moisture, vegetation health, and ground temperature that are completely invisible to the human eye. A buried stone road affects how plants grow above it. They may be stunted or have a different chemical signature. From hundreds of miles in orbit, a satellite can spot these faint, ghostly traces, a straight line of slightly less healthy grass crossing a farmer's field, or a faint discoloration in the soil of a desert. Guiding ground teams to the exact location where they should begin to dig. This is how lost sections of the Silk Road have been pinpointed in the arid deserts of Uzbekistan, and how the course of a Roman road, long since plowed under by centuries of agriculture, can be traced across the entire English countryside. Of course, technology alone does not write the story. It simply shows us where to look. The real narrative is unearthed painstakingly by hand, trowel, and brush. When archaeologists excavate a site, they are reading a complex, multi-layered history book made of dirt. They analyze the very soil of the road itself, the specific composition of the gravel in a Roman roadbed, the type of clay used to pack the joints in an Inca wall, to understand the sourcing of materials and the construction methodology. Every artifact found alongside or within the road is a crucial clue. A coin minted in Rome and discovered in a ditch beside a road in India provides a concrete date for when that section was in use. A shard of distinctive Han Dynasty pottery found at a Caravanserais in Persia offers undeniable proof of the long-distance trade in everyday goods, not just luxuries. The wear patterns on the stone itself tell a story. deeply rutted paving stones speak of centuries of heavy cart traffic, while a path worn smooth by countless sandaled feet hints at its use by pilgrims or common travelers. Perhaps the most vital and often overlooked partners in this rediscovery are the local and indigenous communities who have lived alongside these ancient pathways for generations. Their oral histories, passed down through stories, songs, and poems, often contain remarkably accurate geographical knowledge, the old names for passes, the location of forgotten springs that were once vital way stations, and the traditional routes taken by their ancestors. Archaeologists increasingly collaborate with these communities, recognizing that this living memory is an invaluable map. In the Andes, knowledge held by Quechua communities has been essential in locating and understanding the sacred purpose of certain segments of the Teotihuacan. This partnership ensures that the research is not just an academic exercise but a process that respects and revitalizes cultural heritage, allowing the descendants of the original road builders to reclaim and tell their own story. The impact of these discoveries is profound. They do more than just confirm what we read in the accounts of historians like Herodotus or Marco Polo. They constantly surprise us, uncovering entirely lost chapters of human history. The ongoing study of these roads reveals a world that was far more interconnected, sophisticated, and resilient than we previously thought. Each excavated milestone, each mapped caravan route, and each analyzed pottery shard adds another piece to the puzzle, fueling a new appreciation for the sheer scale of ancient ambition and the enduring legacy of these stone and earth arteries that first made the world feel smaller. This relentless pursuit of knowledge ensures that the story of these sacred roads is never finished, but is continuously rewritten with every new discovery. It is a remarkable testament to ancient foresight that if you were to get behind the wheel of a car in many parts of Europe today, you might literally be driving on the same road a Roman legionary marched down 2,000 years ago. The enduring physical presence of these ancient pathways is one of the most direct ways they influence our modern world. Across England, France, Spain, and Italy, the foundational routes of the Roman Via often lie beneath modern asphalt. These roads were built so straight, so well drained, and on such strategically sound alignments that later engineers saw no reason to change them. The famous Via Appia, which once connected Rome to the port of Brindisi, still serves as a vital regional highway, its ancient stonework merely covered over by modern paving. This is not just a quaint historical footnote, it is a staggering display of engineering longevity. The Romans chose the most efficient paths between points, navigating the easiest mountain passes and the most stable river crossings, and that geographical logic remains just as valid for a modern trucker as it was for a Roman cart driver. Their work effectively locked in the primary transportation corridors for entire continents, creating a skeleton of connectivity that we are still fleshing out with high-speed rail and fiber optic cables. This phenomenon of ancient routes becoming modern thoroughfares is a global story. In South Asia, the Grand Trunk Road stretches over 2,500 kilometers from Bangladesh, across India and into Pakistan. Its origins are incredibly ancient, likely following paths established during the Mauryan Empire in the 3rd century BCE and later expanded by the Mughals. Today, it is designated as National Highway 2 and National Highway 1 in India and Pakistan, a bustling, chaotic, and vital artery of commerce that hums with the noise of modern trucks, buses, and cars. Yet it follows the exact same logic as its ancient predecessor, connecting major population centers following the fertile plains south of the Himalayas and serving as the undeniable backbone of the subcontinent's overland trade. The road itself has been widened and paved, but its soul and purpose are utterly unchanged, a powerful example of how a route's economic and social function can persist for millennia, simply adapting to new forms of transportation. Beyond simply using the old roads, modern civil engineers actively study them, treating these ancient structures as a masterclass in sustainable and durable construction. In an era increasingly concerned with climate resilience and the wastefulness of constant repair, the longevity of Roman concrete and Inca stonework is a subject of intense scientific inquiry. Researchers are still trying to fully decode the chemical secrets of Roman pozzolana mortar, which not only lasts for centuries but actually grows stronger over time as it continues to react with seawater and minerals. This research could lead to modern concretes that drastically reduce the carbon footprint of construction by eliminating the need for frequent, energy-intensive replacements. Furthermore, the holistic approach of ancient builders is a lesson in itself. They didn't just build a road, they built an integrated system that included drainage, way stations, and bridges, all designed to work in harmony with the local environment. Modern planners are now revisiting this systems thinking approach, understanding that a highway is more than just a strip of pavement. It is part of a larger ecological and human network. The cultural and economic value of these ancient paths has also found a powerful new expression in the form of heritage tourism. Across the globe, sections of these historic routes have been preserved, restored, and promoted as long-distance walking and cycling trails. The most famous is Spain's Camino de Santiago, which has seen a phenomenal resurgence, drawing hundreds of thousands of modern pilgrims and tourists each year. This influx provides a sustainable economic boost to the small villages and towns along the route, supporting a network of hostels, cafes, and guide services. Similarly, trekking the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu has become a bucket list experience for adventurers worldwide, with the revenue generated funding conservation efforts and providing livelihoods for local Peruvian communities. This modern repurposing transforms these roads from historical artifacts into living, breathing entities that continue to facilitate human connection, though now the currency is often personal enrichment and cultural exchange rather than trade in silks and spices. Perhaps the most profound legacy of these ancient networks is not found in stone and mortar, but in the very concept of a connected world. The Silk Road was the original internet, a decentralized, resilient network for the exchange of goods, information, and ideas across vast cultural divides. The fundamental principles that made it successful are the same ones that underpin our modern globalized systems. The ancient reliance on standardized protocols, like the use of Arabic or Sanskrit as lingua francas, finds its echo in the TCP/IP protocols that allow the world's computers to communicate. The Caravanserais, which provided safe, standardized hubs for rest and resupply, are the historical precursors to today's container ports and logistics centers. The ancient world understood that prosperity and innovation thrived on connection, and they built the physical infrastructure to make it possible. Our ongoing digital revolution is simply the latest iteration of this timeless human impulse to reach out, trade, and share knowledge, proving that while our vehicles and velocity have changed beyond recognition, the destination remains the same, a more interconnected and interdependent human family. Today, the legacy of these ancient pathways is not confined to history books or archaeological sites. It is a vibrant, living heritage actively preserved and celebrated across the globe. This ongoing effort represents a powerful shift in how we value these wonders, moving from seeing them as static ruins to recognizing them as dynamic cultural corridors that continue to connect people and stories. One of the most significant steps in this process has been their designation as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, a status that confers international recognition and a commitment to protection. The Silk Roads, for instance, are not a single site but a sprawling serial nomination encompassing roads, passes, caravanserais, and entire cities across China, Central Asia, and beyond. This acknowledges that the road's true value lies in its interconnectedness, its ability to tell a story that no single ruin could. Similarly, Spain's Camino de Santiago, Japan's Kumano-Kodo pilgrimage routes, and sections of the Inca Teotihuacan have all received this esteemed status, ensuring that these irreplaceable monuments to human endeavor are safeguarded for future generations under a global covenant of preservation. The work of restoration itself has evolved into a profoundly collaborative endeavor, one that actively involves the communities who have lived alongside these roads for centuries. Rather than being a top-down process led solely by foreign experts, modern projects increasingly draw on local knowledge and skills. In the Andes, Quechua and other indigenous communities are often employed as the primary laborers and guides on restoration projects for the Inca trail system. They are not just workers, they are knowledge keepers, their understanding of traditional stone fitting techniques and the spiritual significance of the path being absolutely essential to an authentic restoration. This approach does more than just repair stonework. It fosters immense local pride, provides sustainable economic opportunities, and ensures that the skills used to build these roads thousands of years ago are not lost but are instead passed on to a new generation, creating a powerful living link to the past. Beyond the physical stone and mortar, a monumental effort is underway to preserve the intangible heritage that gives these roads their soul. The stories, songs, languages, and traditions that traveled along with the merchants and pilgrims. Museums dedicated to these routes, like those in Dunhuang, China, or along the Silk Road in Uzbekistan, do incredible work curating artifacts, but they are now going much further. They are using immersive technologies, creating digital archives of oral histories from the descendants of traders, and recording the fading dialects that were once the lingua francas of these networks. Digital humanities projects are creating virtual reality experiences that allow anyone, anywhere in the world, to don a headset and walk through a digitally reconstructed caravanserai, hearing the sounds of the market and seeing the goods that were traded. This digital preservation ensures that even if a physical site is threatened by climate change or conflict, the knowledge and culture it represents can be saved and shared universally. The most profound way people connect with this heritage, however, is by literally walking in the footsteps of history. The global phenomenon of heritage tourism has seen a massive resurgence in trekking these ancient paths. The Camino de Santiago now draws over 300,000 pilgrims and hikers from all over the world each year, all seeking their own personal transformation along the route. Walking tours retracing sections of the Silk Road or following Roman roads in England allow people to experience the scale, the challenge, and the beauty of the journey firsthand. These are not passive vacations, they are active, embodied experiences. You feel the ache in your legs climbing a mountain pass, you share a meal with fellow travelers in a small village, and you stand under the same stars that guided ancient navigators. This direct physical connection transforms history from an abstract concept into a deeply personal and emotional understanding, creating a new generation of advocates for these precious cultural resources. This cultural revival adds an entirely new, living dimension to our exploration of these ancient networks. They are no longer relics to be studied behind a rope barrier, but active, participatory spaces for cultural exchange, education, and personal growth. The preservation of these roads ensures that the stories of the diverse people who built and traveled them, their hopes, their faith, their ingenuity, and their resilience are not forgotten. They become a shared inheritance for all of humanity, a powerful reminder that our world has always been connected, and that our greatest achievements are often the result of collaboration across cultures and continents. This ongoing celebration ensures that the sacred roads continue to be pathways not just through space, but through time, carrying the lessons and the spirit of the past directly into the present day. Looking back at these incredible networks of stone and earth, we find far more than just historical curiosities. We uncover a deep well of wisdom that speaks directly to the challenges we face in our own interconnected age. The most profound lesson etched into every mile of these ancient highways is the transformative power of connectivity itself. These roads were not built by isolated empires working in a vacuum. They were the physical manifestation of a fundamental truth, that collaboration and exchange across cultural and geographical boundaries are the most powerful engines of human progress. The Silk Road did not just move silk, it moved ideas. The transfer of Buddhist philosophy from India to East Asia, the preservation and enhancement of Greek science by Islamic scholars, the cross-pollination of artistic styles from Persia to China. None of this would have been possible without the open, collaborative spirit these pathways fostered. They remind us that innovation rarely happens in isolation. It thrives at the intersections, in the bustling marketplaces and caravanserais where different ways of thinking meet, mingle, and create something entirely new. In our modern world, with its digital networks and instant communication, this ancient lesson urges us to look beyond borders and silos, to actively seek out diverse perspectives and build bridges of understanding, recognizing that our most complex problems require solutions forged through global cooperation. Equally compelling is the stunning demonstration of resilience these roads represent. Consider the obstacles ancient builders faced. They had no dynamite to blast through mountains, no computers to calculate stress loads on bridges, no global supply chain for materials. They had only simple tools, local resources, and an intimate, hard-won knowledge of their environment. Yet they did not try to conquer nature through brute force. Instead, they practiced a form of elegant adaptation. The Inca built roads that flexed with earthquakes. The Romans engineered surfaces that shed water and withstood the relentless pounding of carts and marching feet. They worked with the grain of the landscape, navigating the easiest passes and fording rivers at their most stable points. This resilience was not just in the construction, but in the very purpose of the roads. When political empires collapsed, the physical pathways often remained, repurposed by new cultures and continuing to serve as vital connectors for centuries. This teaches us a crucial lesson about sustainability and longevity. It challenges our modern tendency to build for the short term with materials that quickly degrade. Their example calls for us to design our own infrastructure with a deeper humility and a greater respect for natural forces, creating systems that are not just strong but are adaptable, durable, and in harmony with the world around them. This legacy of resilience and connection offers a powerful lens through which to view our own contemporary struggles. The threat of climate change, for instance, demands the same kind of ingenious, adaptive engineering that ancient builders employed. We are now challenged to construct cities and transportation networks that can withstand rising seas, intensified storms, and extreme temperatures. The ancient roads show us that the answer lies not in higher walls alone, but in smarter, more flexible design infrastructure that can absorb shock and adapt to new realities, much like the Inca stones that settle back into place after a tremor. On the social front, our world often feels fractured by division and mistrust. The ancient networks stand in stark contrast as a testament to what becomes possible when we prioritize connection over isolation. They encourage us to invest in the modern equivalents of those ancient pathways, not just physical roads, but digital and educational infrastructures that facilitate the free and respectful exchange of ideas, foster empathy between different cultures, and create a shared sense of common purpose. Ultimately, the silent, enduring presence of these roads across the landscape is a message of hope. They are a physical reminder that humanity has always faced immense challenges and has consistently triumphed through a combination of brilliant ingenuity, unwavering determination, and a profound desire to reach out and connect with one another. They prove that collaboration across difference is not a naive ideal but a practical necessity for advancement and survival. By studying their paths, we gain more than just historical knowledge. We receive a blueprint for building a future that is more inclusive, more sustainable, and more interconnected. Their stones whisper that the greatest monuments we can leave for future generations will not be symbols of separation, but the lasting pathways that bring us all closer together. Despite our incredible advances in archaeology and technology, the ancient road networks of our world still guard some of their most profound secrets closely. These lingering enigmas are not simply gaps in our knowledge. They are captivating puzzles that continue to challenge experts and ignite the imaginations of enthusiasts around the globe. The very existence of these unanswered questions reminds us that the past is not a book we have fully read, but a story we are still diligently piecing together, with each discovery raising new and fascinating possibilities about how our ancestors saw and shaped their world. One of the most visually stunning and hotly debated mysteries revolves around the Nazca lines in Peru. While often described as geoglyphs etched into the desert floor, many researchers now propose that these vast, straight-line formations functioned as sacred processional paths. The question of their true purpose remains wide open. Were these precisely cleared avenues used for ritualistic walks, allowing pilgrims to commune with the giant representations of spiders, monkeys, and birds that they connected to? Or did they serve a more astronomical function, acting as giant sightlines to celestial events that were critical to the Nazca people's cosmology? The sheer scale of these lines, which can only be truly appreciated from the air, adds another layer of profound mystery. Without the ability to fly, how did the creators plan and execute such perfectly straight and massive designs? The debate continues to rage, with every new theory adding to the rich tapestry of speculation that makes this site so endlessly compelling. Beyond specific sites, we are still grappling with the sheer scale of what has been lost. The full extent of many transcontinental routes remains a shadowy outline on our historical maps. We have solid evidence for major arteries like the Silk Road, but what about the countless smaller capillaries that branched off from them? How far did trade routes deep into Africa or across the islands of Southeast Asia truly extend? The origins of some of these paths are also obscured by time. A road might be clearly Roman in its construction, but it often sits atop a much older trackway used by Bronze Age or even Neolithic peoples. Untangling this layered history is like trying to separate the threads of a massively complex tapestry, where each era has woven its own story over the top of the last, leaving us to decipher the faintest traces of the original pattern. The sparse written records from many cultures mean we are often left with the physical archaeology alone, and stones do not speak as plainly as scrolls. Perhaps the most humbling mysteries are those surrounding the raw engineering feats themselves. In cultures that did not use the wheel, such as the Inca, the question of how they transported truly massive stone blocks across vast distances and up incredibly steep mountain slopes remains a subject of intense study and debate. The conventional explanation involves teams of laborers using ropes, log rollers, and earth ramps, but experimental archaeology often shows just how difficult and dangerous these methods would have been on such a grand scale. Could there have been lost techniques or technologies that we have simply not yet considered? Some have even proposed the use of sonic levitation or other advanced, almost mythical knowledge, ideas that, while far-fetched, speak to the profound awe these accomplishments still inspire. The precise fitting of multi-ton stones without mortar, a technique seen from Peru to Egypt, is another marvel that we can replicate only partially with our modern tools, leaving us to wonder if the ancient builders possessed a refined understanding of stonework that has since been forgotten. These enduring mysteries are not frustrating dead ends. They are the very engine that drives the field forward. They invite healthy speculation, encourage interdisciplinary collaboration between archaeologists, engineers, and anthropologists, and ensure that the study of ancient roads remains a dynamic and living discipline. Every unsolved question is an invitation to explore further, to look closer, and to never assume we have all the answers. This sense of wonder, this acknowledgement that the past still has secrets to reveal, is what propels us toward the next great discovery, ensuring that our journey to understand these sacred pathways is far from over. For those feeling the pull to literally walk in the footsteps of the merchants, pilgrims, and legionaries we've been discussing, the incredible news is that you absolutely can. These ancient pathways are not just relics locked away in museums. They are living, breathing experiences waiting for you to step onto them. Imagine the sensation of your own boots on the same stone paving that once supported Roman sandals, or the feeling of standing on a mountain pass in the Andes, gazing at the same constellation of stars that guided an Inca Chasqui runner. This isn't just reading about history, it's about physically connecting with it, allowing the landscape to tell you a story that no book ever could. The opportunities for this kind of immersive exploration are as diverse as the roads themselves. You could embark on the world-renowned Inca Trail, a demanding multi-day trek through the sacred valley of Peru that culminates in the breathtaking dawn arrival at the Sun Gate overlooking Machu Picchu. Every step along this stone-paved path, through cloud forests and over high mountain passes, is a lesson in the engineering tenacity of the Inca Empire. Alternatively, for a completely different vibe, you could cycle along the Via Appia Antiquae just outside of Rome. Riding a modern bicycle on the massive, worn basalt blocks of this ancient highway, passing crumbling tombs and grand monuments, is a surreal and powerful way to absorb 2,000 years of layered history at your own pace. For the truly ambitious, there are organized tours and overland expeditions that retrace segments of the Silk Road, traveling from Uzbekistan through the rugged landscapes of Kyrgyzstan, staying in restored Caravanserais, and experiencing the vast, awe-inspiring scale that define this legendary network. Thankfully, embarking on such an adventure is more accessible than ever thanks to a wealth of modern resources. Detailed guidebooks from publishers like Lonely Planet or Brat offer historical context alongside practical advice on accommodations and logistics. For the tech-savvy explorer, apps like AllTrails provide GPS maps and recent reviews for hiking sections of ancient routes, ensuring you can navigate them safely. Specialized tour companies now offer guided journeys led by expert historians and archaeologists who can point out details you might otherwise miss, translating the subtle language of the landscape and bringing the ruins around you vividly to life. These resources demystify the process, turning a daunting expedition into a manageable and deeply enriching vacation. With this access, however, comes a vital responsibility, the duty to tread lightly and respectfully. These are not theme park attractions. They are fragile archaeological sites and often landscapes of deep spiritual significance to local and indigenous communities. Practicing sustainable exploration means staying strictly on designated paths to prevent erosion, packing out every single piece of your trash, and respecting any signage or local guidelines that restrict access to sensitive areas. It means understanding that a historic monument is not a climbing gym. Resist the urge to scramble on ancient walls or structures, as the oils from your hands and the pressure of your feet accelerate their decay. This mindful approach ensures that these wonders will remain intact and powerful for the generations of explorers who will follow in your footsteps. The reward for this thoughtful approach is an experience that transcends ordinary tourism. It's the profound, almost indescribable feeling of connection that arises after a long day of walking. It's the moment you sit on a sun-warmed Roman milestone, eat a simple lunch, and look out over a landscape that has changed little in millennia. In that silence, broken only by the wind, you're no longer just learning about history. You're momentarily a part of its long, unbroken thread. You gain a visceral, gut-level appreciation for the sheer physical endurance these journeys required, and a deep respect for the ingenuity that made them possible. This hands-on encounter transforms abstract facts into personal, unforgettable memories, forging a direct and emotional link to the past that will stay with you long after you've returned home. The story of these ancient roads is far from finished. In fact, we are standing at the threshold of what might be its most exciting chapter yet, as a new suite of technologies promises to peel back layers of the earth and centuries of history to reveal secrets our predecessors could only dream of uncovering. The future of exploring these networks lies not just with shovels and trowels, but with satellites, algorithms, and vast digital collaborations that are fundamentally reshaping the field of archaeology. Imagine artificial intelligence systems trained to scan thousands of square miles of satellite imagery, not for modern features, but for the faint, ghostly traces of a lost path. These AI programs can be taught to recognize the subtle spectral signatures of buried stone, the way certain plants grow differently over compacted soil, or the minute variations in ground moisture that betray a hidden causeway. This isn't science fiction. It's happening right now, allowing researchers to process enormous datasets in days that would have taken a single person a lifetime, pinpointing potential sites for ground verification with astonishing accuracy and revealing the true, continent-spanning scale of networks we once only knew in fragments. Beyond simply finding these roads, new technologies are allowing us to experience and analyze them in breathtakingly immersive detail. High-resolution LiDAR scanning, which uses laser pulses to map the ground surface even through dense forest canopy, has already revolutionized our understanding of civilizations like the Maya. Now, archaeologists are taking this data and feeding it into powerful 3D modeling software to create hyper-realistic digital twins of entire ancient landscapes. We can virtually walk down a Roman road at the height of the empire, seeing how it looked winding through a now-vanished forest, with accurate reconstructions of way stations and milestones placed along its length. We can simulate the wear and tear of different types of traffic on an Inca roadbed or model how water would have flowed through its drainage systems during a heavy storm. This isn't just about creating pretty pictures. It's a powerful analytical tool that lets us test hypotheses about construction, use, and maintenance in a risk-free digital environment, gaining insights that are simply impossible to glean from static ruins alone. The most profound discoveries, however, will likely come from the fusion of these digital tools with traditional fieldwork in a truly interdisciplinary approach. The future isn't just about archaeologists working alone. It's about building dream teams that include ecologists, climatologists, geologists, and data scientists. An ecologist can analyze ancient pollen samples trapped in the soil layers of a road's foundation to reconstruct the precise environment through which it passed thousands of years ago. A climatologist can cross-reference periods of road expansion or abandonment with climate data from ice cores to see how droughts or periods of heavy rainfall influenced trade and travel. A geologist can trace the precise quarry source of a paving stone, revealing specific trade routes for construction materials that we never knew existed. By stitching together all of these disparate threads of evidence, we will move beyond simply knowing where a road was to understanding why it was built there, how it changed the local ecosystem, and what its existence meant for the daily lives of the people who used it. This urgent work is not just an academic exercise, it is a race against time. The very sites we are striving to understand are under unprecedented threat from the dual pressures of climate change and rampant urban expansion. Rising sea levels are eroding coastal routes, increased flooding is scouring away fragile earthen paths, and more frequent wildfires are damaging ancient stonework. Meanwhile, the relentless spread of cities and infrastructure projects can pave over irreplaceable history in a matter of days. This looming loss makes the mission of digital preservation more critical than ever. Initiatives are now underway to use photogrammetry and laser scanning to create perfect, millimeter-accurate 3D models of entire road sections, caravanserais, and bridges. These digital archives serve as an eternal, immutable record, ensuring that even if the physical site is lost to a landslide or a new highway, every detail of its construction and context is preserved for future generations to study, analyze, and even experience through virtual reality. Thankfully, this grand endeavor is no longer confined to university labs and research institutes. The future of discovery is also becoming democratized through the rise of global citizen science projects. Online platforms now allow anyone with an internet connection to examine high-resolution satellite imagery from their own home, tagging potential archaeological features for professional review. This effectively creates an army of millions of eager volunteers, all contributing their time and curiosity to the search for our shared past. Furthermore, international collaborations are breaking down traditional academic silos. Researchers from dozens of countries are now pooling data, sharing techniques, and working together to study these roads as the global networks they always were. A scholar in Italy can instantly access and analyze 3D scan data from a site in Oman, comparing construction techniques and sharing insights in real time. This collaborative, open-source approach is accelerating the pace of discovery and fostering a truly global conversation about this incredible shared heritage, ensuring that the story of these sacred roads will continue to be written, explored, and marveled at for centuries to come. As we've journeyed through the history of the sacred roads that linked continents long before modern maps, we've uncovered a world of ingenuity, exchange, and endurance. We began by tracing the humble origins of these paths, from simple animal trails worn into the earth to the magnificent, engineered highways of empires. We explored how these routes were far more than just stone and dirt. They were conduits for the human spirit, serving as pilgrimages for the devout, stages for royal ceremony, and lifelines for entire economies. We stood in awe of the engineering brilliance that allowed ancient builders to conquer mountains and deserts with little more than stone tools and profound observation, creating structures so durable they still support modern traffic today. We followed the caravans of merchants whose daring journeys moved silk, spices, and gold across unimaginable distances, fueling the growth of cities and the fortunes of kings. We saw how these same roads carried something even more precious than material wealth. They were the original internet, transmitting ideas, faith, art, and innovation between cultures, slowly weaving together the intellectual fabric of our world. We witnessed their strategic role in building and defending empires, allowing armies to march and messages to fly with astonishing speed. And we shared in the very human drama of the road the hopes of pilgrims, the courage of messengers, the ever-present threats of bandits and the elements, and the nightly camaraderie found in the safe haven of a caravanserai. From their mysterious origins and spiritual power to their eventual decline and modern rediscovery, these sacred roads offer us a powerful mirror. They reflect a timeless human truth that our greatest achievements have always arisen from connection and collaboration. The same impulse that drove a Roman engineer to lay a straight road through a swamp and a Silk Road merchant to learn a new language to close a deal is alive in us today. It is the drive to explore, to trade, to share ideas, and to understand one another. These ancient pathways remind us that infrastructure is more than just functional. It is the physical embodiment of our shared ambition and our collective story. I sincerely hope this journey has inspired you to look at the world a little differently, to see the ancient threads still woven into our modern landscapes, and to appreciate the incredible depth of our shared human heritage. I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever walked an ancient road yourself, like the Camino de Santiago or a section of the Appian Way? What part of this story resonated with you the most? Please share your experiences and reflections in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this exploration into the roots of global connectivity, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more adventures into the world's greatest historical mysteries. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a journey. Thank you so much for your time and your curiosity. Until next time, keep